Now, we have on the telephonic device a friend of the Blokes. This is our third visit to this program. You'd think she'd know better, wouldn't you? Her name is Alex Thomas. Now, we have spoken to Alex in the past in the context of her day job, which is an organisation called Plant a Seed for Safety. But today she is talking about a program that she has launched in recent times called From Here to Healthcare. Alex, good morning.
Good morning, Neil. Thank you so much for having me for a third time.
And we wouldn't miss it for the world. Now, we should just wind the clock back a little bit and just let people know your geography and the sad story of your father. Let's start there and then work our way forward. What say you?
Sure. So, look, I'm based in Nairn in the Adelaide Hills, which is a delightful place to live. But I originally came from a sheep station in the northeast, pastoral, up near sort of Peterborough, Yunta, very, very marginal, dry part of the world, and continues to be to this day. And look, Dad shifted out to that part of the world from quite a lucrative farming area in the mid-north around Golden Air, Crystal Brook. And it was the mantra in the late sort of 70s, I believe, to get big or get out. And so the family succession plan included purchasing a pastoral property with a view to diversify. And the long and short of it, I guess, was that Dad had only been out there for, I think, 3 or 4 years or something, and then they got hit by the drought of 82, followed by the drought, the millennial drought, and his response to that, like many other blokes of that era, was to, again, diversify by mustering and selling feral goats. And unfortunately, through that, he contracted this horrible virus called Q fever. Actually, it's not a virus. I think it's a bacteria, livestock-borne bacteria. And that did irreparable damage to his organs and consequently catalysed a bit of a domino effect. So he then got diabetes, heart failure, kidney failure, Ross fever virus. Before he eventually passed away, he'd had up to 7 amputations and was rendered permanently disabled from the age of 56. So I played a lead role in helping advocate for him and care for him from around the age of 15, when sadly my mum and dad split up and we had to sell the station. And I guess and my life's purpose, I suppose, was born as a product of all of those things. So my career is, as you suggest, rooted in work health and safety, particularly in rural communities and agricultural industries more broadly. But I guess it's taken a bit of a turn and it's evolved into something that's more focused on rural health, having advocated for Dad through all the trials and tribulations that we know are associated with the health system. And I guess it's spurred something inside me that, well, I just have to put it somewhere. It's the most, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like an incredible surge of energy and motivation to just push the dial on this front and make sure that people in the country get a fair go when it comes to accessing healthcare.
Now, most of us most of us in this studio, obviously, but most of us in life have worked in an organisation where health and safety is, if nothing else, lip service, but, sometimes it's a bit better than that. But broadly speaking, it relates to not getting yourself into a situation where you have an accident. For example, don't run with hot coffee in your hand, and make sure you've got the right guard on the machine and all that kind of stuff, the preventative stuff. And sadly, your father, case in point, I'm sure when he went out to work, he wasn't, doing things that were necessarily silly. It's just that things happen, and now the subsequent aspect to it, that is the care of people who have been through some accident or some acquired health condition, becomes important.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I don't know if anybody ever goes to work thinking or wanting to hurt themselves necessarily. And Q fever, the Q actually stands for query, because even to this day, there's a lot of gaps in what people know and understand about this horrible virus. And look, you add in the compounding factors of drought and the stress and the financial pressure, and we're talking interest rates of 18% back in the early 80s. Look, it's not terribly surprising that he ended up so dreadfully ill. And there's a lot of other blokes in particular like him. And I think one of the questions I often get asked is, what's the link between work health and safety and what happened to your dad? And look, it's an occupational exposure to that virus. Interestingly, the vaccine actually came out, I think, within 12 months of him having contracted the virus, which is a bit of a bugger. But, yeah, it's, work health and safety as we know and understand it today, unfortunately, is so often associated with another word, which is compliance. And when people typically think of compliance, they think of a top-down, big stick, autocratic, paperwork-driven
checklist
sticking approach. Sorry, what was that?
Checklist.
Yeah, it's a checklist. And I think that narrative is one of the most dangerous, distracting things about work health, and it's actually compelling. It's sending people in the other direction. You want to inspire someone to make a different choice. Don't go in and hit them over the head with a wad of paperwork. Understand what's really going on, what the reality looks like on the ground, and have a conversation about what could kill or seriously hurt someone. And all of a sudden, you've got people's attention because it's relevant. So I could bang on about this stuff forever and a day. But yes, you're quite right. It's all about just coming home at the end of each day and taking a preventative approach.
And I think the aspect of rural life being completely different to city life, but I'm not getting... I'm not seeing an appetite for change, really. There's lip service was something Neil mentioned before, and it's a reality of it at the moment. But the reality, they're different worlds. The pressure of finance and weather and general health, and then, of course, mental health kicks in around that. And then it's across a community and diminishing communities, therefore diminishing support. There's so much different in that world, and particularly out in the neck of the woods that you're talking about, being... north of Adelaide, in that dry, harsh country that you grew up in, it's a totally different world. And I think there needs to be more emphasis on authorities understanding that in their decision-making, because I'm not seeing the two lining up.
Yeah, and I guess, look, one of the things that I just want to clarify with the whole box-ticking mantra is that stems from, massive, big industry. It's a corporate construct, a corporate safety construct, and it's the flow-on effect of that construct into small businesses that creates the state that we're in now. I guess small businesses, and particularly those in agriculture, get a bit of a bad rap because the stats aren't great from a work health and safety perspective, but to the contrary, people inside small family businesses are not numbers. They're family members. I would argue that the care factor and the accountability for making sure that people don't get hurt is extremely high, possibly even higher than what you would find inside a corporate business. Now, I haven't done the research on that, but there's the sentiment there. And I think equally, because small family businesses just don't have the internal safety department to do all the paperwork work, they end up focusing innately on the stuff that matters, like making improvements to, cattle yards to make sure that cattle run freely and people are out of the road. So I think there's pockets of greatness in small family businesses everywhere. It's just we're not necessarily that great at asking the right questions to reveal what they are.
I think the other thing, having spent time in small business, with a lot of small businesses across Australia, but also someone who spent a lot of time in the corporate world, I'm going to be really cynical and probably never get a serious contract again if anyone's listening to this, but far too many corporates do it because it feeds into their bonuses at the end of the month. And I regularly talk about the fact we shouldn't be doing health and safety, we should be living health and safety. And doing health and safety is a lot about ticking boxes and making sure that we've done the compliance and that, the work and health and safety officer has walked past your desk and checked you're sitting right and all that kind of stuff. Whereas, as you say, you tend to care a bit more about the people you work with when they're your family, and that's just, human nature. I'm not having a crack at anyone on that one, but until and unless organisations, government departments, corporates, medium-sized businesses, small businesses across Australia realise that health and safety is like serious stuff, not just a box to be ticked, we're going to be having this conversation for another 25 years.
We are, but I think there's a really endemic sense of fear that underpins a lot of this. I don't think there's any director or board member that wants anybody to get hurt, but I think what we're also seeing is almost like a flow-on effect from perhaps the States, where the culture is you're going to get sued or you're going to go to jail if somebody gets hurt. And the instant response to that is, holy moly, everybody needs to be compliant, right? What do you need to do to provide evidence of that? And yet when you actually do your research as a safety professional and you lean into what's emerging from the universities in this space, there is a lot of really cool stuff that actually just really hams home that policies and procedures and that traditional approach, they don't save lives. It's a virtue signalling exercise at best, and you know, therein lies the opportunity to really recalibrate what we're investing our time and effort into.
Undoubtedly. So, given that we have circumstances that we're dealing with, this is the throwing the half volley outside off stump, you understand, for you to drive through the covers for four. Mm-hmm. Do you perceive that people who work in and live in, you know, places like Peterborough and you know, those sort of places are at some degree of disadvantage in the health system compared with someone who might live in the hills of Adelaide?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question.
And I wasn't put up to that, but I think I knew that was going to be a good question.
Look, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of it. In fact, I know you're aware of it. But before Dad passed away in July last year, he was dealt, in fact, for the second time, an ultimatum to either turn the dialysis machine off and pass away, or leave his home in Crystal Brook and move to Adelaide for dialysis. And it was just such a, you know, I actually feel a bit bad for the medical professionals that dealt that, imparted that piece of wisdom at the time, because I just don't think they were really thinking about what I would do with that after the fact. And it was, you know, it is a fact that there are a lot of services that you can't access, particularly if you're a complex case in the regions versus in Adelaide. But it was just, when it happened, it was so devoid of compassion, and it felt like an absolute shot from the hip, given Dad was on the NDIS and he did actually have access to a lot of different supports, not without an enormous amount of effort on my part to actually make that happen. That's another discussion altogether. But it really did showcase to me how different it is for people living in the bush, in terms of, you know, what they can and can't access. And for a man, Dad was 68 when he passed away. He had never lived in Adelaide. Never, you know, he'd rather go to the grave than live in Adelaide. And I just think that, you know, country people are so humble and so grateful for what they've got, typically. You know, and there is definitely this kind of sense that, well, it just is what it is. You know, the kilometres, the amount of time away from their day jobs and their children and their families that rural people are having to expend just to get access to things that you can jump on a bus and get within 10 or 15 minutes in the city. You know, we're not asking for a Royal Adelaide or a Royal Melbourne hospital on every corner necessarily. It's simple things like being able to see a GP within, you know, a week perhaps, whereas in Peterborough, for example, there isn't a GP and hasn't been one since August, and you're looking at a sort of 6 to 8 week wait and you'll see a different GP every time. So it's, I think, again, we've reached a critical threshold with healthcare in the regions, and hence why I'm very passionate about it and very keen to get quite vocal.
Because I think if you know, there's lots and lots and lots of medical professionals who every day go to work knowing that they're going to have to provide some really bad news to somebody. You know, I'm sorry, your cancer is at such a point, we have no other options available to. But that's not, I don't think that's almost, you know, a statement of fact. When you do what's happened with your dad, do this or rip your entire life apart. Having to give that choice, you can imagine, well, I can't imagine, but you know, the thing that your dad is hearing and the thing that you're hearing when that happens, I'm sure the person who's delivered that message has got no concept of the magnitude of that particular question.
No, and look, to be absolutely clear here, I'm not taking task to any particular...
Oh, absolutely not. No, we're not having a crack at anyone.
No, and I feel for them, because they're victims in all of this as much as possibly we are. I mean, you don't enter a role in health not wanting to exude compassion, particularly when you're dealing, when you're giving someone bad news. But I think that is what the system is. That's the product of the system that they exist within. Is that these types of ultimatums are, the reality for people in the bush and the reality for the health providers who have to give that feedback. So it's a horrible perpetual challenge, I think, for everyone.
The South Australian example is interesting. After living at Keith for 3 years, which is on the major Melbourne to Adelaide highway, so there's lots of activity, but still that town, 240 kilometres from Adelaide and similar distance from Mount Gambier, couldn't get a regular GP for periods, locums as they were called, drop in. And of course the thing that staggered me about that part of the world is the ambulance service is volunteers from the community. There's not an ambulance structure that we have in Victoria as the norm, that South Australians have to rely on community members to go and train themselves, to put themselves in position to save lives. It's quite staggering, but that's real Australia.
It certainly is. And I guess, I'm also not stepping away, and I don't think you are either, stepping away from the fact that this is a wicked, complex problem here. And one of the things that I've really battled with over the last, 6 months or something is, naturally, when you're trying to make some noise on a topic like this, decision makers want a clear call to action. They want a quick win. They want something they can hang their hat on and get done. And every time I speak to someone different, there is a different call to action. And no call to action is any less significant from one to the next. But I think what I'm calling for here is just that rural health becomes a priority, because at the moment it just doesn't really feel like it is. It feels like it keeps getting lost in metropolitan health, which has its own problems, but they're amplified to a magnitude of 10 as soon as you leave the city.
Yep. It is a serious concern, and I think it makes it worse when you see government expenditure in some areas and then they say, oh, sorry, we don't have anything left to solve this problem over here in rural health. It's quite depressing.
It is. And look, the National Rural Health Alliance has done some spectacular work on this, and it doesn't sound to me like there's any shortage of data. I mean, you can always do with more data, right? And my head is not in this space. I'm obviously focused on spotlighting lived experiences here. But the challenges have been quantified and qualified over and over and over again. I think I'm almost speechless, actually. But I think perhaps where the gap might be is putting the sentiment behind the statistics to help raise the profile.
So, Alex, we're just about out of time, sadly, but if we've got people listening who are equally grumpy about this as they should be, what can people do to support your messaging at the moment?
I would say just jump on social media and have a look for From Here to Healthcare. We're a grassroots initiative that shines a spotlight on the unique challenges faced by rural patients and their families, and we're really just looking to help amplify the voices of people in the bush. So jump on there, follow us, comment, share posts, and we've also got a survey open at the moment now. The initial, or the first encouragement, I suppose, from my perspective, is always contact your local representative if you want to take this to task. But we're also really, really strongly encouraging people to share their stories with us so that we can help keep that momentum going.
Well, our local member is Christine Cousins, and she is the state member for this part of the world, let's call it that.
Seat of Geelong, yeah.
And she regularly on this station puts out a message saying, if I can help, get in touch. So, folks, get in touch. Give Christine's office a call. She's up at Packington Strand. Go and knock on her door, send her an email, do something to say rural health matters. Because even though we live in Geelong and we've got a nice we've got 2 shiny new emergency departments and all that kind of stuff, that doesn't help if you live in Dartmoor. That doesn't help if you live in Warwick-Nabil. So get off and give Christine a call, or your local member if you're listening to this somewhere else, and say rural health matters, because Alex is a prime example, and Alex's family has been through some really tough times over the last 12 months, and we just need to support people like Alex who are getting off at their you-know-what and doing something about it. Alex, we love the work you're doing, both preventative in the world of plant a seed for safety, but this is a really important cause, and glad that we could give you some time on the wireless.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much, you two blokes. You're awesome.
Thanks, Alex. Best wishes
Thanks,
to
Alex.
you.
We'll talk soon. There she is, Alex Thomas, and if you want to know more, find From Here to Healthcare on your social media. She's on Facebook, I know she's on LinkedIn, I think she's on Instagram. Get on there. Give her some encouragement because her messaging is really, really important.
And when it's coming from a place like that of working with her own father's health to be the passion driver, but just talking to her off air before, the drive that she has to do this is extraordinary.
And the other thing to be aware of there, at no stage did she bag politicians.
No.
At no stage did she bag anyone. All she's doing is saying, oi, take some notice out here. It's really important. And she specifically asked us not to talk politics in that conversation because it's not about politics, it's about people's lives.